The day I walked out of the orphanage, I thought I was finally free. Free from the cold stares, the whispered jokes, the feeling that I didn't belong anywhere. But I had no idea that the real surprise was waiting for me outside those rusty gates. They told me I had inherited something from my parents. For a second, my heart actually felt hope. Maybe a small house, maybe some savings, maybe something that proved I wasn't abandoned for nothing. But when the lawyer looked at me and said, "It's just a cave," a worthless cave in the middle of nowhere, everyone in the room laughed. And that was the moment I realized my life was either about to end in silence or begin in a way no one could imagine. If stories like this touch you, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Emotional Twist. It really helps the channel grow, and you never know which story might change the way you see the world. Now let me tell you what really happened. I was 18 years old, carrying everything I owned in one worn-out backpack. The orphanage had been my whole world since I was 3. I never knew my parents. All I had were 2 blurry photos and a last name that no one could pronounce properly. The staff never treated me cruelly, but they never treated me like family either. I was just another file in a metal cabinet. When the lawyer first contacted me, I thought it was a mistake. "There must be some confusion," I told him. "No one leaves anything to kids like me." But he insisted. My biological parents had owned a small piece of land before they died. There was no house on it, no electricity, no water connection, just a rocky hillside and a cave. "Honestly," the lawyer said as he handed me the papers, "it's practically worthless. You could try selling the land, but I doubt anyone would want it." The other boys at the orphanage heard about it and laughed. "Hey, caveman," one of them joked. "Going back to the Stone Age?" I pretended not to care, but inside something burned. That cave was the only thing my parents had ever given me. Worthless or not, it was mine. 2 days later, I took a bus out of the city. The ride lasted almost 4 hours. The buildings slowly disappeared, replaced by fields and empty roads. I got off at the last stop, and from there I had to walk nearly 3 miles. The air felt different, cleaner, quieter. For the first time in my life, there were no sirens, no shouting, no locked doors behind me. When I finally saw it, I almost laughed. The property was nothing more than a rocky hill surrounded by dry grass. And there it was, a dark opening in the side of the hill. My inheritance. I stood there for a long moment, feeling stupid. This was it? This was the grand gift my parents had left me? A hole in the ground? Part of me wanted to turn back, sell it for whatever little money I could get and disappear into the city. But another part of me, stronger, louder, told me to at least look inside. The entrance was narrow, but once I stepped in, the space opened up more than I expected. It wasn't just a small crack in the rock. It was deep. The air inside was cool and damp. I used my phone's flashlight to see. The walls were rough stone, and the ground was uneven. There were old wooden crates near the back, covered in dust. My heart started beating faster. Why would there be crates in a worthless cave? I walked closer. The wood looked old but not ancient. I brushed off the dust and saw something carved into the side. My last name. I froze. My parents had been here, not just owned it on paper. They had used this place. With shaking hands, I opened the first crate. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them, all carefully wrapped in plastic. I pulled one out and opened it. It was my father's handwriting. He had written about everything, his work, his plans, his ideas. And then I saw drawings, complex sketches of machines, water filtration systems, solar-powered generators, designs for something that looked like a small hydroelectric setup. I didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. This cave was not random. It was a workshop. I opened another crate. This one held tools, high-quality tools, carefully stored, not cheap hardware store stuff, professional equipment. And then I found the third crate. Inside was a small metal box with a lock. The key was taped to the lid. I hesitated before opening it. My hands were sweating. When the lock clicked open, I lifted the lid slowly. There were documents inside. Property maps, patents, official papers. My father had been an engineer, a brilliant one. He had developed a low-cost water purification system designed for rural communities. According to the papers, he had been in talks with investors just months before he and my mother died in a car accident. But something had gone wrong. One document caught my eye. It was a rejection letter. A major corporation had declined his proposal. The tone was cold, dismissive. They claimed his design was impractical and commercially unviable. Yet the notes in his journals told a different story. He believed his system could provide clean water to thousands of people at almost no cost. He had chosen this remote land to test it privately. The cave stayed naturally cool, perfect for storing equipment. There was even a small underground stream running through the lower section of the cave. I found it an hour later. Hidden behind a narrow passage was a small flow of clear water running through the rock. My father had built a basic filtration prototype there. It was old and dusty, but it was real. That was the moment everything changed. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an abandoned kid. I felt like the son of someone extraordinary. I decided to stay, at least for a while. I camped inside the cave that night, using an old blanket from my backpack. It was uncomfortable, cold, but I didn't care. I kept reading my father's notebooks by flashlight until my phone battery nearly died. The next morning, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I wasn't going to sell the cave. I was going to finish what he started. I had no money, no formal education beyond high school, no connections, but I had his designs, his research, and his belief that this could work. Over the next few weeks, I took small jobs in the nearest town, cleaning yards, carrying boxes, fixing fences. Every dollar I earned went into buying basic supplies, batteries, small solar panels, replacement parts. I moved fully into the cave. People in town thought I was crazy. "You live in a cave?" One man laughed. I just nodded. Let them laugh. At night, I studied my father's notes. During the day, I tested small versions of his system in the underground stream. The first attempts failed. The water came out cloudy. Filters clogged too quickly. I nearly gave up more than once. But every time I felt like quitting, I read one specific page in his journal. On it, he had written, "If this works, it won't just change our lives. It will." One afternoon, after countless adjustments, I filled a clear bottle from the output pipe. The water was crystal clear. I tested it using simple kits I had ordered online. The results shocked me. The contamination levels had dropped dramatically. It worked. Not perfectly. Not on a massive scale. But it worked. That's when I did something bold. I recorded a short video on my phone. I explained the story, showed the cave, showed the system. I uploaded it online, not expecting much. Within days, it had thousands of views. People were curious. Some were skeptical. But a few engineers reached out asking questions. One nonprofit organization contacted me. They worked in areas where clean water was scarce. They wanted to test the design. The first official trial happened 6 months later in a small rural community. I traveled there with them, carrying a refined version of my father's system. When the first families filled their containers with clean water and smiled, I felt something break inside me. Not in a painful way, in a healing way. The worthless cave had just provided clean water to an entire village. News outlets picked up the story. Orphan inherits cave, discovers father's life-changing invention. That headline followed me everywhere. Investors who had once rejected my father's design suddenly wanted meetings. But this time I was careful. I partnered with organizations that prioritized impact over profit. Over the next 3 years, we installed systems in multiple communities. Each time, I visited the cave before any major decision. It remained my base, my reminder of where I started. Eventually, I renovated it properly, added proper lighting powered by solar panels, reinforced the structure, built a small cabin outside. But I never destroyed the original space. The crates stayed where I first found them. One evening, sitting near the cave entrance, watching the sunset, I realized something powerful. If I had inherited money, I might have spent it and moved. But I inherited a challenge. And that challenge saved me from becoming just another statistic. The orphanage staff later invited me back to speak to the kids. I stood in the same hall where I once felt invisible. I told them about the cave, about the laughter, about the rejection, and I told them this: sometimes what looks worthless is actually your greatest gift. The world might not see the value in it yet, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. Today, the foundation built around my father's invention continues to grow, and every system installed carries a small engraving inside my parents' names. I still visit the cave often. I sit by the underground stream and remember that first day when I almost walked away. If I had listened to the laughter, none of this would exist. So if you're watching this and you feel like you've been handed nothing in life, maybe you've been handed something disguised as nothing. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever faced something that looked worthless at first but turned out to change your life? I read your stories, and they matter more than you think. And if the story moved you even a little, share it with someone who needs hope today. You never know whose life might shift because of a single message. This is Emotional Twist, and stories like this remind us that sometimes the darkest caves hide the brightest futures.